You fell off a roof, and that had to be a very traumatic experience.
Mm-hmm. I spent that winter in a wheelchair and external fixators, that looks like an erector set on the outside of your body.
What if the success you've been chasing isn't what truly fulfills your heart? What if everything you thought about money, security, and happiness needed to be flipped upside down to reveal a deeper truth?
If I had a choice between losing all my money and losing all my relationships, I would lose all my money in a heartbeat, because my relationships will help me get my money back. I really trust God on this.
You faced a significant health challenge.
I was diagnosed with prostate cancer.
What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Don't take advice from anybody you wouldn't want to change positions with. You don't need to know everything to get started. And if you get with people that are doing the same thing, they're going to open doors for you.
What if the success you've been chasing isn't what truly fulfills your heart? What if everything you thought about money, security, and happiness needed to be flipped upside down to reveal a deeper truth? Today, you're going to hear a story about a man who's walked away from the comfortable glow of fame, embraced the uncertainty of pioneering new paths, and faced life-changing trials, from painful loss, financial fears, and a devastating fall from a roof, to battling cancer and also the heartbreak of infertility. But through every challenge, Joel Miller learned something invaluable, that relationships matter more than riches. And in this heartfelt conversation, Joel's going to share openly and vulnerably, revealing powerful insights he's discovered about generosity, legacy, and living intentionally. And if you're someone seeking genuine fulfillment, looking to align your life with your deepest values, or struggling to choose what truly matters over the world's shallow measures of success, this episode is meant for you. We're in Erie, Pennsylvania today. If you couldn't tell, it's a little bit different than the normal studio. I'm here with the author of this book, Joel Miller. If you see this awesome book, Build Real Estate Wealth, we're going to dive into this conversation with Joel. Joel, welcome to the Big Fish Cares podcast. How you doing?
Good, Benny. I really appreciate you having me on. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, no, this was fun. Yeah. And I love the Phoenix studio, by the way. It's definitely a unique vibe. I feel like out front we got some funeral home vibes. Like I think they used to do something with dead people, and now it's a home, right, for people that are rehabilitating from alcohol and drugs, right? So
the building has been repurposed.
Yeah, this is cool. Little podcast studio here. So before we dive deep, I want to know something about you that most people don't know. Can you share something about that?
Most people don't know that I've kept track of everything I've earned and spent since I was 11.
And you still have the records?
I don't have all the records, but I did it as needed along the way, starting with when I got my first paper route.
Yeah. Wow. So I have a cousin like that. We kind of always made fun of him that like he still got checks from like when he was like 15 years old, probably stacking up in his top.
I would say I still have everything since probably just getting out of college.
Where did that come from?
My dad was an auditor for the IRS. Not an income tax auditor. He was an excise tax auditor, where you business.
So he was a little bit cooler.
Business taxes, and his training was in bookkeeping and so on. And he had done some of that in the Navy in World War II. And I don't know, he just kind of instilled a passion for record keeping that exists to this day. I ended up getting a 4-year degree in accounting right out of high school, and I would say that I use that every day, in business.
Yeah, it's a good one to have, especially if you have. I don't know too many accountants who are very entrepreneurial, but the ones that are, man, that is a built-in function.
Well, see,
that is a built-in function that is such a relief. As long as you don't get too hung up in trying to like save too many pennies, you know what I mean? And so that's a struggle that most accountants have is like, are they allowed to spend money?
Well, see, my interests are two-sided. I did get my degree in accounting, and immediately started an accounting practice after college while I was simultaneously starting another business, my mobile DJ business, which I think we'll probably talk about, and buying my first rental property. And I quickly discovered that as much as I like record keeping and doing tax returns and so on, I don't like doing it for anybody else. So it's just for me.
You're just like keeping track of all your pennies.
Yeah. Here's the thing. It gets to be like January, February, and I'll be doing my entity tax returns and so on. And I kind of feel that that's like, in my mind, sort of parallel to the NFL playoffs, and then when I and that would include then up to filing the tax returns, and then right after the middle of April, when I file my tax returns, I do a financial statement, and that's my Super Bowl. I can't wait to compare it to the prior year. It's a sickness. Hopefully. It's really.
Well, you've turned it in. You've definitely masked the sickness into some cool stuff like this book, and I really want to know is what inspired you at the deepest level to write this book, especially considering your own son's future?
Well, you mentioned my son, and that was it. As the book was started during COVID in 2020, when we all had a little more time on our hands at home and so on, I started making the notes that would lead to creating the book. And he was in his later teens at that point, and it was becoming apparent that he did want to get involved with rental property, that he had seen our family involved in his whole life. And so I wrote the book almost like if he was the only one that ever read it, that would be okay. Because there's nothing in here that I haven't done or that I wouldn't do if I had the opportunity. And there's nothing in here that I wouldn't recommend to my own son. It was not written to, anonymous audience that I would never meet and who would never hold me accountable to it. The person that would hold me accountable to this lives down the hall, and I see him every day. So it had to be right, and it was after a long career in this business, and also my volunteerism with the professional organization for landlords in this part of the state, and teaching landlord 101 classes, things like that, where it kind of dovetailed together. Like, okay, I kind of have a few things to say. I like to teach. I can write, and let's pull all this together, and have a legacy for not only my investor friends that remain in this area, but mainly my son, who is my only child and is quite a bit younger than me. So I won't be around his whole career, to every time some question comes up. I was 51 and a half when he was born.
So I thought I started late. I'm 43 and I just had a baby in January. So, man, 51, that's impressive.
Yeah. And so he, as we record this, is just finishing his first year at Penn State Barron, which is the local Penn State branch campus in the business department there, which is a highly rated business department. It's in the top 5% in the country, according to the people that rate those things. I didn't do it,
I don't even know. He's going to college, and he probably, college is good. You said that you learned a lot, and you're still using your accounting stuff. And I always wonder now, it's like, can we just teach our kids what they need to know enough, or do they need to go to that college? Do they need? Do they need the college experience? And
I think he has that attitude,
especially getting into the rental. If he already knows that he's getting to get into houses and doing dad's business and like. Well, this might be the only textbook he needs, that and a little accounting practice.
He'll learn more from the book and from talking to me than directly related to the rental property business than he will learn in college. But I insisted that he go to in the business department. And if you asked him right now what his major was, he'd tell you finance. I don't think he'll major in accounting as I did, because he doesn't have that record keeping passion,
precision.
But yeah, he'll get business administration knowledge and so on. And I firmly believe that he can take it further than I ever did.
I want to go back to the early life, the childhood stuff. And you talk about your parents in the book and their strong influence on your values. Mm-hmm. Can you share a vivid memory from your childhood where your parents' generosity left a lasting impression on you?
Well, we were always involved in a church. My mom sang in a choir until her voice gave out in her 80s. Wow. You know, pardon me. And pardon me. My dad had a lot of leadership positions in the church. We were Presbyterian, so he was on session, and ultimately became the church treasurer, which he was for 23 years till the day he died. And after he died, the church, along with our family, established what is known as the Fred G. Miller Service Award. And that is an award that is given away annually to someone that the church chooses that has served the congregation to a large extent, you know, and they have to have been a member for like 20 years before they can be considered for the thing, you know. And so I go back to that church. I belong to a different church now, but I go back to that church once a year to present that award. Yeah. Wow. And now I'm the church treasurer at the church I belong to.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
It runs in the blood. Yeah. What about like your dad, and what about his generosity that, like, you know, like, give me an example of like what you witnessed maybe when he was alive.
Well, he would give money to people that were in need. He would, the church, it wasn't, you know, a big congregation that always had enough money for everything. And sometimes there would be something, maintenance issue at the church that needed taken care of. And he was a treasurer. He knew where the money wasn't, you know, and he would just say, I'll just take care of that, you know. So, you know, that was the attitude I grew up with, you know.
Pretty lucky.
Not only serving, but also giving financially.
I feel like that's a pretty lucky childhood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Most of the people I interview on this podcast don't have that kind of amazing, you know, dual parent type of upbringing. And I find it refreshing, actually, that, you know, because I worry about my kids. I'm like, if my kids like grow up in this like nice home and they like have all this nice stuff and they keep, you know, I call it like the Leave It to Beaver family, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, do they need to go through a bunch of adversity as a child to, like, you know, excel on the other side of that? And I'm sure you had your fair share of adversity, which we'll touch base on.
Yeah. And I concern myself with that a little bit with my son, you know, that we don't make sure that everything's just handed to him. You know, he's got to experience some stress and pain and challenges along the way for his own good. You know?
You got a good piece of parenting advice out there? Because like I have younger kids than you, and so I'd love to hear a quick parenting tip. As it regards to that, right? Because I mean, you literally can give your kid whatever you want, but you have to figure out how do you draw that line? Yeah,
that's a moving target. That is a moving target. You think like you bounce back and forth between, hey, I want him to go earn it like I did and go through all the trials and tribulations, but then the other side is, I have worked to have money so we don't have to have those.
So we can skip through some of those things. And we can get
you got to catch yourself sometimes and say, we're not going to just hand it to them. You know,
that's interesting.
So, but my one word for you would be patience when it comes to those kids.
Patience. All right, I'm going to write that down. So, and I think you alluded to this a little bit earlier, and I find this the most fascinating about you. When I first met you at that mastermind event, and you told me that you were a DJ. You know, so you initially pursued, I feel like, two very polar opposite career paths, right? And so, you know, this DJ thing, this real estate investing,
and the accounting.
And the accounting. You know, I kind of tie the accounting. You did the accounting for yourself, so I kind of tie it into this like you know, real estate thing all at the same time. But what early experiences or internal motivations led you down these two paths?
I can tell you exactly what happened.
Good.
And when I was in junior high, there were two major events that shaped my life that happened right in my neighborhood. First, some investor built 4 4-unit townhouses on my paper route. at the edge of our subdivision. And we all lived in a relatively new subdivision, single family homes, with their parents and so on. And these were lots that just hadn't been bought for the single family homes, and somebody put these multi-unit places on them. And so this was new. And I have a distinct, first of all, I got all those tenants on my paper route as customers, and
10 cents a paper.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And I have a distinct memory of being probably in about 8th grade in my bedroom, literally doing the math on how this rental property stuff works. And I said, so they don't own that place, but they live there and they pay somebody that does own it. And they pay them more than the expenses that it takes that investor to run that. A very rudimentary understanding of it. I said, I want to do that someday. And I kind of put that in my back pocket. The other thing that happened was one of the older kids in the neighborhood built a pirate radio station in his basement and had a flagpole in the backyard for the antenna.
Was it for the Pittsburgh Pirates or for like pirates like out to sea type of pirates?
Pirates is in not legal radio station.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
pirating. Okay,
in his basement,
Western Pennsylvania. I didn't know if you were trying to get that 1979 World Series on it.
No, not licensed by the FCC.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right. That's a big deal back then.
Yeah.
That's what kids were getting in trouble for back in the 70s, probably.
Yeah, and I got to hang out there.
That's funny to think about that now, like pirating like radio.
Yeah, there were a few pirate radio stations around town that spawned people that became big names in the local in the Erie media radio business. But I got to hang out at that station, and again, I'm still in junior high school, whatever, and that's when I kind of made a decision, like I would like to be a disc jockey. And so in high school, I started a nonprofit called the Spring Foundation. We actually incorporated it, and it stood for Students Promoting the Return of Integrity to the Now Generation. Now, Now Generation was a media term that they called us kids back then. We wanted everything now, that sort of thing. You don't hear it anymore, but it was a term then.
No, now we want everything yesterday.
Yeah, right. And its purpose was the production and distribution of radio public service announcements. And so, as soon as I could drive, junior year high school, I would interview all the bands that came to Erie, either primarily at the Warner Theater, or the what was known as the Gannon Audi, which is it has a different name now, but it's the big gymnasium connected with Gannon University, which is in Erie. And I interviewed Sha Na Na twice, actually, Poco, Todd Rundgren, the Beach Boys, Joe Walsh and the James Gang, a whole bunch of people. And then what I would do, I would drag in my 7-inch reel-to-reel, quarter-inch reel-to-reel tape deck with the microphone that had the cable wound up in the lid of the tape deck into the locker room, which is the dressing room of these places, and interview these people. And I would ask them to make comments about like drug abuse or ecology or brotherhood or something like that. And then I would take the tapes to the different radio stations around town that would allow me in the production studio and make public service announcements using their words and their music. And all the radio stations in Erie played them because they have a requirement to play a certain amount of PSAs, for their FCC license, and they're stuck with things like from the military or get out and vote or
drink milk.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were, this is great because this music sounds like our format anyway. And then when I went away to college, I made sure I went to a college that had a good radio station and also a good accounting department.
So you're like a pioneer in this world. Like, that's interesting because I have a similar, not similar track into like this podcasting world. Like when I was in 6th grade, this is when like VHSs were still out. We were editing videos. We would do decks of VHS. I remember at my church, we had 1-inch reels and we were doing it on a 1-inch reel. And then I gave it all up because I thought like, to go to school for all that and do all that. And I wanted to become like Bob Costas or something like that, be a sports announcer. And they're like, only like the top 1% out of the 1%. I'm like, all right, I give up on that. But then as the internet came out and as now podcasting became a lot more accessible,
Yeah.
I feel like I got my voice back. I said, this is fun. Like,
we're sitting here right now.
I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do as a little kid.
Yeah.
And so here we are.
Oh, I was desperate to play music over the radio. I considered for a while using CB channels to play music, and that would have been totally illegal, but
I want to know what they would do to you. Like, is there anybody doing prison time right now? If you know somebody that's done prison time for playing music over a CB channel,
well, the FCC like to find people.
I want to interview.
So I was the only freshman on the air at Grove City College, where I went to college. And actually, we had an AM and an FM station there. And the AM station is the oldest station in the world. And I'm telling you this because you're a Pittsburgh guy. You all think that KDKA is the oldest radio station. And it's the oldest commercial station. But the first scheduled radio broadcast was from the campus of Grove City College to the Rotary Club in Newcastle. They sat there and looked at a box, which the Rotary Club meeting. You know how you have a speaker at a Rotary Club? Mm-hmm. And they listened to the president of Grove City College make an address on the radio. And then that station continued to broadcast from that point on. That was in April of 1920. KDKA went on the air covering the Harding-Cox presidential election returns in November of 1920.
This guy's a history buff, too. So I want to kind of pivot from the DJ thing and back into the real estate. And so I think after you left the radio station, you had a defining moment. You bought your first rental property without the security of like a regular day job, right? Walk us through that vulnerable moment of what that was like, the fears, the doubts. Like, what were you battling then when you decided?
I was battling not having a lot of money. I mean, we should make a distinction here that I started out on the radio as a disc jockey, but I became the first full-time professional mobile disc jockey in this part of the country. And
that's in the book, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
I want them to read the book.
Yeah, so
get more of the book.
But that's the what you're after here. I didn't have a job.
That's what I mean.
On the radio that when I was buying that first rental property, I was already less 6 months on my own as a mobile DJ, and mobile DJ was not a thing yet. You know, you're younger. You would think like, well, yeah, I know. You know, there's always been guys doing weddings and stuff. Wasn't a thing yet, you know. And they told me when I left the radio station, they said, you can't, you're not going to make it. You can't do any of these appearances unless you're connected to a radio station for the people that just call the radio station and want us to come out and do stuff, like sock hops in the school gyms and stuff like that.
The old school, the old guard.
Yeah, so that was a concern, you know. How I to this day I don't know how I got that bank to give me that loan.
Well, how did you? That's what I'm saying. Like what was going? Do you remember what was going? I know it was a long time ago, but like what was going through your mind then? Because like there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to these podcasts, and we really want to. There's people that are working a day job maybe that want to jump into entrepreneurship. Right. There's people that haven't found, like, they're still kind of afraid. Like they're solopreneurs. They're still doing the same thing that they were doing at a job, but they really haven't taken that risk, right? They haven't taken that leap, we call it. And so like what fears and like, did you have to overcome? And like, what were your parents saying anything? Were they supportive? Like,
yeah, they were a little mystified about, I was still living at home, but, well, it was time to take that whole discussion I had with myself in 8th grade out of my back pocket about rental property and examine how this works. I started reading literally hardcover books by, Bill Nickerson, Al Lowry, that sort of thing. And so I realized that unlike what, you mentioned entrepreneurs that want to start a business and it can be unpredictable as far as what the income might be. Unlike that, rental property is very predictable because it in itself is what produces the income. I knew what I could get for rents, and I knew what my expenses, had an idea what my expenses would be. I knew what my mortgage amount would be, So it's not like opening a storefront and just hoping people come through the front door. Mm-hmm. It's like I own this building and let's just put some people in here that are willing to pay the amount of rent. And if they leave, we get somebody else. What
was interest rates like back when you first started, when you got your first loan?
They were pretty high. I don't remember what they were on that first loan for rental property, but this was January of 1978.
Because they got real high in the early
Jimmy
80s,
Carter
right?
was president, and the prime rate was about 22%.
He was our best president, wasn't he?
He, you know, he had his ups and downs, you know, but I can tell you that I was a tenant in somebody's apartment for the first 5 years that I owned rental property that I was renting out to other people. So by the time I went to buy my very first residence that I was going to live in 1983, I was pleased to get 12.5% interest on that mortgage.
We're crying about 7 right now. Like crying.
Yeah,
like
and that was down from what it had been.
But at the same time, though, you can get a house for 20 grand, right? 30 grand, 40 grand, like.
My first house was $75,000 in 1983.
Really?
Yeah.
It was that high. Must have been a mansion.
It's a nice place.
What about your first rental property? How much was that?
25.
Yeah, see, like 25 grand. So, I mean, like, I will say 12%, 20% ain't that bad on 25 grand. Mm-hmm. You know, now our houses are
and we turned
now our houses are $500,000. You know, and 7% really adds up quick.
And we turned it from 2 units to 3 units immediately.
Oh yeah, just put some walls in and a little
my dad
extra bathroom, and like we figured out how to squeeze a couple
and a bathroom and a kitchen.
There you go.
Put up a wall.
So what did that teach you as a young person who's in this accounting world? You know, your dad grew up, you know, in this, you've watched him, you know, you're playing the numbers game. What did it teach you about risk taking? What did it take you about financial security? Like, what did it teach you in those early days?
Well, my parents weren't risk takers.
I know they weren't, but what did that teach you about risk?
Well, I must have come up with that myself, you know, the willingness to take a risk, you know, with buying rental property that young and, you know, leaving a full-time job at a radio station and starting something that never happened before. But my mom, you know, was definitely like, you should have a job. You know,
I think all of our moms are like, you got to get a real job.
Yeah, and that's the way it is now.
You get a paycheck on Friday.
Yeah, my wife is certainly less entrepreneurial than myself, and would be just as happy to see our son have a job at the same place she works.
Yeah,
you know,
like a real job.
Yeah. Right. But it's something that this risk-taking thing, it's something that I believe is born into you. You know, I don't think people teach you to take risks. I think you have that in you, and people have to teach you to tamp it down more than they have to tell you to take the risks.
That's true.
Yeah.
I read a book called Driven by Dr. Douglas Brackman, who basically says that 10% of us are born with this gene defect where we don't get dopamine hits like the regular people, like the other people do. They go there 90%. And so we constantly crave dopamine, and we have to go out and
have to go do something.
We have to go find it. And like, it's just constant, right? Like, we're the hunters of the world. Like back in the old days, like we were the ones that go out, fight, kill, go gather food, bring it back. You know, it's like, we're the adventure ones, right? But we help support the other 90%. And out of those 10%, I think half or maybe like 4% of the world is like entrepreneurial, right? So the other ones are like Navy SEALs, firemen, you know, stockbrokers, you know, risk takers, right? Like they might not be entrepreneurs, but then there's like these 4% that are entrepreneurs. And so it's very interesting because it comes with the blessing side of being the one that gets to provide and gets to do all the cool things, and we're the adventure ones, but then also the curse side, right? Like there's this constant need to kind of always be producing and always like showing up, and
serial entrepreneurs.
It can become exhausting, right? And especially if you don't have a good team behind you to be able to close all the loops on all the things that you start. Yeah. But one thing I want to ask you next is like the common thing that most of us driven, so I'm just going to refer to it as driven. We're driven. Okay. Is this thing about letting go, right? And letting go of control, because control feels safe to us. Okay. And you mentioned that you struggled with feeling that you needed to handle everything yourself, right? And I think a lot of people that listen to my podcast can relate to that. What eventually pushed you to relinquish control and trust to others?
When you realize that you're not going to grow unless you do that. You know, at first I did all the work on the properties myself, and I don't I don't regret doing that because I worked with my dad in the earlier years. You know, he was able to retire early, so by the time I was getting into this, and he had a lot of skills in carpentry and so on like that.
He was able to retire early because you were helping him.
Yeah.
He delegated to you.
Yeah. So I learned how to do a lot of the things, and that pays off later because then you know what can be done. I'm speaking about at a property. Mm-hmm. You know what can be done. You know what to ask a contractor to do for you. You know when they're doing it right. You know if they're taking about the right amount of time and if they're charging you about the right amount. So if you start out never learning any of that, that's a bit of a disadvantage. You have to, trust a lot of people sooner if you don't have any aptitude with any kind of mechanical work or carpentry work or whatever.
Could even be accounting. I mean, like you got to do accounting work before you can hand it over to a bookkeeper.
Right. So that can be hard to let go. But I realized that I needed to start paying people to do things that I could do, but my time would be better served finding deals and just telling other people what to do. And like in the DJ business, when I just got in the mobile DJ business, when I got maxed out, you would think, well, let's just hire other disc jockeys and buy have their equipment and they, have their van, they drive around and you have a business where you're just hiring the DJ. And some guys went that route. I chose to go the referral route, where if I was already booked, I would help the people that were calling me get set up with other mobile DJs that were established. And then I would handle the contracts between the two of them and just get a referral fee from that. And that way I didn't have to own any extra vans or equipment or, anything like that. And,
you make your 10%, which goes straight to the bottom line. You're going to get 10% anyway.
Yeah. And they were happy to get it. I really helped build a lot of other guys' careers with the referrals that I was able to give them.
We got the Joel Miller DJ tree. Like we have the Bill Belichick football coaching tree. We have the Joel Miller DJ tree. That'd be interesting. Yeah. That'd be a whole nother podcast though. Yeah. Give me a specific moment in time when you delegated or trusted somebody or someone else in your business that significantly changed your approach to life and business. Who was that first person or what was that first experience like when you're like, oh, wow, this is going to work?
Probably the first time I had somebody else replace a hot water tank.
You're like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. That doesn't bring me any energy.
Yeah. No, I don't know that I have a specific event that I could tell you about. It was because it's such a gradual thing. You gradually sort of relinquish things, and like I said, I just started using more contractors in the DJ business, and I started doing the referrals. Contractors in the rental business. I started doing the referrals in the DJ business, but I never gave up my accounting of my own. I've never had anybody.
What's one of the last things that what was the last thing you delegated in the contracting world, like the swinging of the hammer side? Like what was the last thing you gave up there?
Well, doing an entire house for a flip. Mm-hmm. When I first started, I had money partners. They put up the money. I did the work.
But you did all aspects.
But right? I was doing the work, and then not too long after that, it moved into I was the one putting up the money and hiring somebody to do the entire project, and I only decided what was going to be done.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Do you think you'll ever let go of the accounting? Is there anybody that you could? I'm sure there's great firms and great people that you can trust to do it.
Not our personal accounting, but coincidentally, yesterday we had a meeting with a CPA that is going to be handling my son's work going forward because of his business structures and so on. I'm going to help him with his bookkeeping, his preparation of data, but it's going to be somebody else that will actually be doing the returns for his business trust that he
No,
has.
that's fair. I mean, I think that we all had a hold on. As long as it's passionate and you're passionate about it, it brings you energy still. I always tell people to do it. And you're familiar with Gino Wickman, right? The guy that wrote Traction and the book Shine. We talked about at the mastermind. He's got a discipline. Discipline number 7, I think, is don't do $25 an hour work.
Right.
And really, we talked about it. I was in a meeting with him a week ago. We said, maybe a better way to say it is don't do any work that doesn't bring you energy. Like positive energy, right? And so, like, where I know some guys, they love mowing their grass.
Yeah,
right?
I was just the very thing was crossing my mind.
It's like you know, it's for me, dude. I don't want to mow my grass. I'd rather pay someone $50 a week to mow my grass, and like that's best money spent all week.
Yeah, I have to fight my wife for the riding lawnmower. I mean, it's the thing she loves to do. You know,
it's peaceful.
There is one of the other entrepreneurials in our local. Real estate community that is probably one of the most successful ones. And yet he loves to power wash. He will not hire anybody else to do that.
What would my son Sammy say? He calls it satisfying. He's like, Dad, that would be satisfying. That's what the kids say on YouTube. That's satisfying.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. All right. We're going to take a little bit of I'm going to shift a little bit because I believe that in every entrepreneurial story, in every person, there's like these life altering things that happen, you know, these crossroads. And I was reading your book and it said one of the most powerful decisions that you shared was trusting God by fully tithing 10% of your income. Describe the internal shift that you experienced at that moment that you decided to commit to that, and then what emotions were involved with that?
Well, I can say that I was aware of generously giving to church, and I was aware of the term, but it wasn't until probably at this point, close to 40 years ago, there was a guest speaker at the church that I'm still involved in, which is an Assemblies of God church. And he had a talk about tithing that really made me think about it a lot. And I just made the decision, okay, well, I'm going to really trust God on this. And I can point back to that time period that, when you tithe, you're essentially letting God take control, of a lot of your finances, if not all of them, and a lot of people can't figure out how they could give up 10% of what their income is, and I can say that it was really at that point that things really started to grow for me, and I'm, being a record keeper, I'm very intent on not guessing what that 10% is.
Well, that was my follow-up question. Yeah. So for all of us that are interested in dabbling our toes in the tithing, because it is, I grew up in a Baptist church and dude, they really preach on that. 10%, right? To the local church, First question I have is, does it have to be to the local church, or can I just, if I want to donate some to the Phoenix House, or if I want to donate some of my money to the Ronald McDonald Charity, or, your whatever nonprofit you said you started? I mean, like, am I able to do that, or does it have to be to the local church?
Local church. If you really get particular about the way it talks about it in the Bible. And by the way, it's in the book of Malachi, which is in the Old Testament. When Malachi talks about tithing and saying that if you tithe, you're I don't want to say reward, because you shouldn't tithe to get a reward. But I mean, the result from that will be that your blessings will be pressed down and running over. Like pressed down in the container, like really fit in there and running over. And it also says that that is the only place in the Bible where any one thing is mentioned that we are allowed to test God. We're not to test him in any other thing. He's God. But God did say, test me in this tithing thing. It works.
What do you mean by that?
Test me.
Like, give me an example of like how we could test God with tithing.
Well, by doing it and expecting a result. We shouldn't expect a result from God in any other thing.
Oh, so we should expect a result if we tithe.
Yeah.
That says that in the Bible? So that'll be interesting.
Right. Pressed down, running over. Okay. So,
I never heard that before.
Yeah.
Because I always thought we were just supposed to, like, kind of like what you said, like, just kind of give. Mm-hmm. And just because that's what we're supposed to do, and whether we get anything or not, like, hey. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a pretty good discussion about it in the book where, I examine how you should really do it. Like if you're self-employed and so on, you've got to tithe on your net profit. It's not like, let's say you've got a retail store and you make $100,000 gross. You're not going to tithe on the $100,000. You might make 20, net of that.
So I got another question. This is the entrepreneur in me. Because it's very gray, because I can literally control my expenses. I might be able to run some expenses through my business that, I get to control how much I spend in my business, right? And so the more I spend in my business, then the less I'd have to tithe, technically, according to your formulation.
Yeah.
But then there's always this like thing in my mind that, like, should I tithe a little bit more? Like, because that was a little bit of a fluffy,
do your business.
That was a little bit of a fluffy expense, maybe. I don't know.
Do your business and make your expenses presumably for purpose of operating your business and growing your business.
So basically, whatever I'm showing the IRS, I should basically, whatever I'm paying taxes on, is basically I should just take that times 10%, and that would be a good tithe number.
Well, not necessarily, because there's non-cash out expenses like depreciation that would come into play.
That's what I'm saying.
What we're looking at is cash flow.
Okay.
And also, if you have a business, like an entity from a business that is making money and you're preserving some money in that business for growth, like maybe in the real estate world to purchase another property or something, but you have a draw that comes out of your business, that's what you're tithing on, is your draw.
Everything that comes over to the personal side.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So if we hold it in the entity, it can stay there. So once we take it over to the personal is when we should maybe pay God.
Yeah, because presumably the growth of the cash in the entity is for the purpose of growing the income that you can have a bigger draw.
All right, last question about this, because I know people are probably already bored with this, because I'm fascinated with this, because I'm always trying to figure out. So we talked about the local church. What happens if a person doesn't really have a local church that they like?
Oh yeah, that was the question you had originally.
That's so okay. So if you don't have a local church, you're going to tell me to go get one, and I understand that. But what happens if you say, "Oh, I have my home church"? So I'm just going to give you my example. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in Canton, Ohio. Mm-hmm. So I have my home church back in Canton, Ohio. I also have this one pastor friend that used to be a pastor there. Now he's got his own church, and he's made a big impact on my life, and I'd love to help his church out too. And then I also, so I'm thinking like there's like 3 churches that I'd like to give 3.5%, 3.5%, and 3.5% to. But is that allowed, or like what's God going to do to me? Like,
first of all, when you have big questions like that, you got to get before God and see what He tells you. But here's my quick take on it.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Let's use the term fed. You go to a church to be fed, but I mean, you go to worship, but let's just say you're getting something out of your involvement with your church that in the form of more knowledge of the word, fellowship with other Christians and so on. So you tithe where you're fed. If you have your home church, that's where you tithe. And if you have other organizations, your home church when you grew up that you don't attend, you're not getting fed there anymore. You can make a contribution.
They fed me to who I became today, though. I don't know. Yeah. So that's why. That's the stuff that goes on my mind.
I'm sure they would appreciate it if you send them.
That's almost like an offering, then, not a tithe. We should tithe and then do the offerings.
Okay, let me explain. There's tithes, and you're not being generous when you tithe.
No, that's
not generosity. That's what you're expecting. That's generosity doesn't kick in until you get past the 10%.
15, 20%.
And then there's another step beyond that.
What's that?
Being sacrificial. Ooh. Because you can be generous and it doesn't hurt. Sacrifice is when it hurts.
John Ruhlin, my friend that wrote the book Giftology, talks about that. That's a good book. I don't know if you've ever read that one, but all right, another life-altering crossroads that I'm fascinated with in your story, and it may be because I owned a roofing company for 10 years. I just sold the roofing company. You fell off a roof, and that had to be a very traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. What realizations, what emotional conflict, internal reflections did you experience during that recovery?
Yeah, first of all, gravity always wins. You know? And secondly, I was totally wrong for what I did. And this was only like 8.5 years ago. I was checking on some tree trimming work that a contractor was supposed to be doing for me. And I was by myself on a ladder on a roof. And the ladder, you know how a lot of houses have, 2-story houses have a 1-story porch that goes the width of the house. I got up on that roof, pulled up my ladder, set up the ladder on that roof, was going to go up onto the main part of the roof. And the ladder kicked out, and I dropped down on the porch roof, and that didn't hurt me at all. But what hurt me was I had momentum, and I got to the front edge of the roof. Fortunately, I got turned around, and I was now facing the street and not falling backwards. And I have 2 memories. Number one, I decided, and this all goes through your mind in like a split second. I'm going to push myself over a little bit so I land on the grass instead of on the cement sidewalk or the cement driveway. And number 2, I'm going to roll. So I led with my right foot to roll, and it just snapped up. And this, my arm here was in 7 pieces because I also came down on my palm of my hand. So I spent that winter in a wheelchair and external fixators, you know, that looks like an erector set on the outside of your body, and knee scooter and casts and braces and a cane, and I couldn't drive or write for like 6 months, you know, and boy, you find out who loves you when you can't do anything for yourself, you know, and so I think the biggest change that came out of that for me was that, and let me back up, I had retired from mobile DJ work in 2011. So, and this accident happened in 2016. So for like about 5 years, I was not exercising. I was in great shape when I was lugging all my equipment around for the DJ work. But I had gotten a little soft. And so the biggest thing that came out of the whole accident was, I think it might have saved my life. Because if I had to make a top 10 list of things I'd never want to do in life, going to a gym and working out would be on that list. And now, starting with the rehab from that, I go 2 or 3 times a week, and I'm in better shape now than when I was DJing. So
how'd your, I'm assuming when you go through something like that the relationship with your wife has to take a whole nother level of like closeness, right?
Yeah,
because you're probably out running around doing all these things, and then I mean, you're forced to be present, right? Like when you have a wake up call like that, like God basically hit you upside the head with a 2x4 and knocked the presence right into you.
Yeah.
And then like you have this like, now tell me what that experience was like with your wife.
Well, there's a funny story. She had a doctor's appointment that day in the afternoon, so she had the opportunity to work from home for her job. So that day she worked from home. We had lunch together. After lunch, she's sitting on the couch and I doing her work, you know, and I said, honey, well, I'm leaving. I'm going over to the house and I'm going up on the roof. I might fall off and die. And she goes, oh, yeah, where are those life insurance policies at? You know, we're laughing. I said, but I might just fall off the roof and gimp myself.
You said that?
Yeah.
To her? And
about an hour and a half later, that was the case.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
But she remembers you saying that too?
Oh, yeah, we tell the story. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so fortunately she does work for a larger company that she was able to take a family leave of absence. And she worked during the month I was in the hospital, but then starting with the day I came home, what happened? She took a leave.
Yeah. Like what, like I know you snapped your leg. Anything else that like actually had anything with your head?
No, I didn't have any head injuries. Didn't have any knee injuries. But the doctor said I lost about 95% of the cartilage in my right ankle. So for about a year and a half, I was walking around bone on bone until I had another life-changing experience, which was I went to Pittsburgh and I had stem cell treatment on my ankle from Regenex, which is a worldwide leader in orthopedic stem cells. I don't know anything about stem cells for disease, whatever, but I've sort of become an apostle for orthopedic stem cell treatments. And many of people that are friends or that I've had a chance to have a conversation with since then have ended up choosing to do stem cell treatment, whereas a doctor was recommending some sort of surgery. My doctor was telling me from the morning after the accident, I met him the next day. He was telling me from the first time I met him that he said, "You're going to want me to fuse your ankle someday." And I really didn't want that. And so the stem cell treatment is what was the answer for me. And I missed one season, Benny, of skiing and snowboarding. To this day, I still ski, snowboard, mountain bike, ride four-wheelers, do ropes courses, go on raft trips. And
so the biggest takeaway I'm getting is that like it actually forced you into learning how to love the gym and work out and then be thankful for your body that God's.
I don't love the gym.
Wow.
But I overcome my dislike for the gym by going,
And then the other thing is, how did it affect your business?
Fortunately,
pros, cons. Give me.
Yeah. It happened in October and fortunately, everybody was in for the winter as far as tenants went. We didn't have to get involved with turning over any apartments. It didn't really affect my business because I wasn't performing anymore, so I didn't have any appointments. It was just the DJ business. And then shortly after the recovery from that is when I got into the hard money lending business.
A little bit easier to do from a chair if you need to. Interesting. Yeah. All right. Last life-altering crossroads moment that I want to chat about because I think it's important. So you were trying to start a family back in the day. You faced a significant health challenge. Tell me about that and also the emotional journey that you went on with you and your wife through that incredibly uncertain time, because I know that had to be okay.
I mentioned that I was 59 and a half whenever my son was born. I should mention that my wife is 20 years younger than me, and we got married when she was...
We assumed that because,
she was 24, I was 44.
Good for you. Good for you. Come on, Joel.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we didn't want to have children right away. But after a few years, we did start trying and nothing was happening. And then I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. So here again, I just didn't want what they tell you they want to do right away. My urologist was saying, we got to chop out your prostate now.
That sounds fun.
Just like, you're going to want me to fuse your ankle. On the aside, I will say, folks, do research. When people want to have just one way that they tell you that is the cure or the process, do some research because there might be another medical procedure or path for you. But I was researching what could be done for the cancer and came up with focal cryosurgery, which is it's actually a procedure that they were using on cervical cancer for about 30 years, where they basically just map out where the cancer is on a prostate and touch it with a super cool needle, and they don't remove your prostate. But even doing that changes your ability to perform for quite a while. I'm talking maybe a year, and so what happened was I went for a consultation in Danville, PA, with the doctor that was going to do this, and he said I was a good candidate. That was in April, and the surgery was to be the beginning of May. Later in April, we discovered that my wife was pregnant, and it was like the last possible month that she could get pregnant before it would have been really disrupted for a long time. And even after that procedure, even though they don't remove your prostate, it's debatable whether you could father any children.
Was that, you think that was an answer to prayer? Do you think that was God intervening? Do you think that, like, I don't know, what was that? What was that time like for your wife? Like when she couldn't get pregnant right away? Was that like very like hard? That's hard.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Right? Yeah.
And we discovered it was me.
Oh, so it's always we're always.
And that was a chance conversation with another friend and his wife, who also had trouble, and he just happened to mention. He said, "Yeah, it turned out that I had some sort of low-grade infection." That was preventing me from getting her pregnant, and they gave me Cipro. And she got pregnant right after that. So I went to my doctor and I told him that story. He said, well, I'll give you some Cipro. And that's when she got pregnant.
Interesting.
Yeah. It turned out I also had some sort of a low-grade infection that was not manifesting itself any other way.
If she was here right now, the question I'd have for her is like, when you found out that you weren't getting pregnant as fast, I said, did you regret marrying the old guy? Oh man, that's 20 years. That's a big gap. I mean, my wife's, let's see, she's 12 years younger, 11 years younger. 20 is that's a good gap. I like that.
Yeah.
Good for you. That makes me think about like the estate planning and all of that, because, 20 years is a big gap, but then your son's probably another, 20, 30 years younger than your wife, right?
Yeah. She was like 31.
Yeah. So like, that's an interesting, step, right? And so does your wife know about like all this real estate works?
Not a clue. No.
But your son's going to be here to manage all the properties one day, right?
I will say she has not participated in the business. Like she's never shown an apartment, but she's in on the financial decisions and so on. Yeah.
Do you ever think that like for most people, I guess it's going to be different for like whoever's like next up. Is it smarter just to keep the whole thing rolling, or is it better just to sell everything and let them do whatever they want with the money?
He's going to buy all of our properties probably in about 3 years when he graduates from college, and then he's off and running. We'll hold the financing and get a check every month from him.
Yeah. That's the smart way to do it.
Yeah.
For people trying to like leave it to the next generation, is like because there's probably
we don't want to liquidate it and just say, well, it's here.
Yeah, because they're still producing income, right?
Yeah, right.
Interesting. All right, a couple of things in the book too that I really loved. When you make this distinction about wealth, being rich and being wealthy, right? And so, how would you define true wealth based on your life experiences?
Well, what we're talking about is the difference between riches and wealth. Like there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is just having the facts, and wisdom is being able to apply the facts to do good, and make good decisions. And riches is just having the money, and wealth is essentially, regardless of how much money you have, being happy with what you've got, in your things that you own for comfort or enjoyment as well as relationships. I'm kind of known around here if I'm getting approached by somebody that's having a problem with, some contractor or tenant or whatever. I say, look, if I had a choice between losing all my money and losing all my relationships, I would lose all my money in a heartbeat, because my relationships will help me get my money back. If I have all the money and no relationships, that's kind of empty. Who are you going to spend that with? So my summary of that is don't make a withdrawal from a good relationship just to make a deposit in your bank account.
I'll clip that. That was a good one. I like that. That's a really good. What do you hope that your son will one day say was the most important lesson that he learned from you?
To do things right, to go the extra step to do the right things the right way, which is what I would hope people would remember about me. I wasn't bumbling through and screwing up and treating people badly, but still made some money and, had a few friends or whatever. I would want him to have that attitude about relationships. Yeah,
it's good. Looking back, is there like a single moment that you're the most proudest of, that you could pinpoint, and not maybe because of like financial success, but like because it embodied like your deepest value?
Well, I would say it's not a moment, but it's a thing that I did for 14 years. I was the director of a camp for foster kids. That was a volunteer position. connected with a worldwide organization from California called, it's now known as For the Children. It was formerly known as Royal Family Kids Camp. And the camps are still called that, Royal Family Kids. And it's a camp for foster kids in our case, the Erie County foster care system. And my wife and I directed that I was the assistant director for the first 5 years, and then the director for 8 years, and then I was there one more year for a transition to a new director.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, foster kids were all between 6 and 12 in the Erie County foster care system.
Wow, that's like a great age too. Mm-hmm. They're so impressionable at that age.
Yeah,
that's when they need good people in their life.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing where those kids are surprised that we're not getting paid to be there, because everybody else in their life, from their, school counselor to their court advocate to their medical people, they're all getting paid.
It's their job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kids are sharp. What's a common belief about success and money that you passionately disagree with?
A common belief that I disagree with? That he who has the most toys wins, That's not what it's all about.
Okay. How about, can you share a mistake or regret that ended up being a powerful life lesson for you?
Well, falling off a roof was a big mistake, and that taught me some lessons about taking care of myself, and
taking care of yourself, or maybe you should just keep hiring contractors to do that stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said,
I'm trying to figure out which one.
I wasn't really doing the work. It was stupid. I was checking on somebody's work and
they got drones. You know how to fly a drone? You know how to fly a drone?
No,
so we use all drones.
I guess that's the lesson, Benny, is learn how to fly a drone.
We use all drones in my roofing company, so that way less people. The less times that we can get on the roof is the last time people can fall off the roof.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, we can't use the drones to install the roofs, but if I keep my salespeople off roofs as much as possible,
insurance companies are using them too for damage estimates.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that was the most powerful life. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received, and how's it guided you through your life?
I don't remember who said it to me, but the advice is don't take advice from anybody you wouldn't want to change positions with.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. I'm not sure who can claim authorship to that. I put it in my own book, passing it along, but yeah.
What do you do right now when life gets overwhelming or difficult? Do you have like a go-to practice or a mindset to like kind of stay grounded?
Got to get out in the woods on my mountain bike or my four-wheeler.
Does that pretty much clear everything up?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And who's been your biggest mentor or influence outside of your immediate family? And what's the most significant thing they've taught you?
Well, I haven't had a lot of mentors because when I got started, you didn't have accessibility to the people that were doing what I was doing. I'm talking in rental property. I'm reading hardcover books and then eventually buying tape courses from late night gurus on cable infomercials.
I remember watching those in the late 90s when I was at home, and I was fascinated with those. Some of them, you could tell.
I had a big collection
of them. Were scammers, obviously, but
I had a big collection of them, and I never met any of those guys. So, and in the DJ business, nobody had ever done it before. I ended up being a mentor to other people.
Well, I know that. See, I know you probably have. I can just tell, like I don't know if you're the godfather of Erie, but I feel like a lot of people know you as like the real estate guy. Mm-hmm. And I know that real estate investing has been a big thing because, as you know, those gurus made it to where like, hey, anybody can do it. And like, you can get rich quick and all of that stuff. And like, you're the guy that's actually doing things the right way, steady Eddie, doing things with discipline. Right. And, you're just a good person, right? Like you can just tell that like you're a salt of the earth person. I think that obviously comes from your, you've had two great parents. It sounds like, you had a great relationship with God. I'm sure it's always touch and go like it is with all of us, but grounded in that, like, I mean, you're a really good human that I think it's just very interesting to me when I hear like you didn't have any good mentors, but like, I guess maybe it was just God looking over you. And then obviously your dad probably had a really good influence on your life. So,
yeah. But I mean, if you're looking for somebody like, this was my guy that helped me take every step through buying rental property. Making it up as I went along.
Maybe not even that, but maybe there was an older guy in the church or something like that you went to that was outside of dad, or like, I don't know. I'm just always curious, like who people go to, because I'm a lot like you now. I've paid my way into like I paid for a lot of mentorship. Now it's a lot more accessible, right? Because of the internet, right?
Well, it's a thing. I mean, people sell mentoring.
Yeah.
Coaching.
I mean, you're selling time. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know. I mean, if you value your time and somebody off the street says, hey, I want to spend a day with you, and you got things to do, and you're supposed to be like, what's his name? Essentialism guy, Greg McCown, and you say no often. But if someone offers you, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 to spend the day with you, eventually there's a price where you're going to say, okay, I'll spend the day with you, Betty. Right? I mean, everybody's got a number. I mean, that would just be stupid not to be able to take that up on you. That's interesting. All right, couple questions. I'm almost done. If someone listening right now feels super trapped chasing this financial security thing, and they're chasing finances like over relationships, right? Because they think that finances is like the gateway to everything, right? Because that's what they've been sold, right? What advice would you have to offer them?
Well, in my book, there's a chapter in there about going from $0 to $10,000 a month in net cash flow. And it has like this fictitious investor that we take through all the steps. And it starts with a guy making $40,000 a year, and he's a tenant for somebody else, And so I think that what you have to understand is that you don't have to know everything before you get started. Like, let's say you have an inkling, you want to start making some investments for the purpose of not only having a little extra money along the way, but also bolstering your retirement. I would want you to understand that you can do it and still keep maybe a job you're passionate about, or a career or something like that. You can do it in addition to that. But the key is having some education. But I would make the point that you don't have to know everything before you take the first step. I mean, Colin Powell, who led the most powerful military ever, I mean, he's quoted as saying, we make our decisions when we know about 70% of what there is to know about the situation. And he's talking war decisions. I'm talking about buying a piece of rental property. You just have to take the step. Get some education, but don't think you need to get everything before you take your first step. You'll learn as you go. And it's education that helps break down those barriers that you mentioned about feeling frustrated about however you put that there with, they're boxed in or whatever. They don't think they can make a move. You got to get some education. You can do it with things like, a book like this, or getting involved with your local organization of other people who are like-minded, other landlords, whatever. And, just rub elbows and get started. And that would be true no matter what industry you're talking about. Is probably you don't need to know everything to get started. And if you get with people that are doing the same thing, they're going to open doors for you.
Well, if you know too much, you might never get started. Like if I would have known, if I would have known everything I knew about this, like being an entrepreneur and owning a roofing company, I probably would have never started it.
Yeah, paralysis of analysis.
Yeah.
And when you start out, you're right. It's sometimes better if you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Because then you wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Because no sane person would do that.
You'd say,
no sane person would do what a startup entrepreneur has to do to get through it. So. All right, last question, actually second to last question. What's one powerful takeaway that you'd like every listener to carry forward from your story today?
Powerful takeaway. Well, I'd say we've actually touched on it maybe in what we were just talking about is you don't have to know everything before you get started. But I would add this, that you got to get your education, but then you have to take action. But beyond action is commitment, because you can take some action and then stop, and you haven't reached your goal or whatever. You have to have a commitment and be able to follow through on things and work your plan. But I would say, even with rental property though, don't set goals. It's just do the deals. I think if you set particular goals for how many units you want to have, you can actually get yourself in trouble, because you'd be making the deals that might not be the best deals just to say you've got the number of units you wanted to have to meet your goal.
Yeah. I actually was at a conference and I heard this guy, his name's Steve Heroux, Herous. He calls himself the sales contrarian, and he says goals, like, you should never have goals. You shouldn't have sales goals. Like, they don't give Tom Brady a goal and say, hey, you have to throw 400 yards today.
All right.
They just say, go in.
You just take the opportunities.
Run the play, run the play. Do your method. In real estate, it's follow the method. Follow the method. Learn how to buy a deal the right way, right? Stay disciplined to that. And the results could end up with, 20 units, 2,000 units. Right. It all depends on, I guess.
If you have a goal, just have the goal be to make all your deals be good deals.
Yeah. Yeah, got to change the goals. Right. All right, last question. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked you?
Oh, I think we covered a whole heck of a lot here, Benny.
And we didn't teach anybody the Burr method.
Yeah, right. Right, we skipped over the Burr method.
There's a lot of information on that, right?
Yeah. You just... you didn't really ask me necessarily about mindset, but I spent a lot of time at the beginning of the book talking about getting in the right mindset for investing and believing that you can do it. And
we'll talk a little bit about it.
Well, just that you have to be intentional with whether you're going to invest in rental property or a retail store or whatever, and not just get buffeted by the winds. And this is not to say, well, wait a minute, you said you don't have a plan or you don't have a goal or whatever. I don't mean it that way. You just need to be intentional and make some plans and be prepared to take different Y's in the road than what you thought you would initially take, and do your best with what comes up, and not be afraid to seek out help from other people. You asked me about mentors. I'm not saying that I never asked anybody else what to do about a thing. I just was never in a official mentoring relationship.
Like a rhythm.
With somebody. But don't be afraid to ask directions.
What's the easiest place for someone if they have questions about real estate or they just want to, reach out to you? What's the easiest place for them to contact?
There's a book, or there's a website that is connected just for the book. It's real easy. It's joelmillerbooks.com. JoelMiller.com. Joel Miller Books, BOOKS.com. And it has a way to contact me on there. And also it has full description of what's in the book, the whole table of contents. You can see what I've got there.
It's a textbook.
Yeah.
Like if you like college textbooks, this is the college textbook on how to build real estate.
This is the new go-to resource on investing in rental property.
Why is this book any different? Why is this book any different than the other million books on this whole real estate world?
Well, first of all, Ron LeGrand reviewed it, and he said, I wish I would have had his book whenever I was getting started, if that means something to you. Oh. But the difference is that most books in this genre are about 200 or 300 pages, and there are a lot of them is just kind of rah, you can do it, go out and invest in real estate. Yeah, right. And if you want to know more, I have a course you can buy. Yeah. That's the middle part of my book. The beginning part takes you all through mindset, entity formation, all that stuff before it even gets into preparation or finding deals and preparing them for people to either buy or live in as a rental. And then beyond that, the conclusion of the book deals with that chapter we're talking about with the impact of wealth, riches versus wealth, that sort of thing, and other chapters about, or at least one on best practices for operating this type of business or other businesses, not only in your personal life but in your business life.
It's awesome.
And
I really appreciate you being here. I mean, I appreciate you being invited into the Erie, through our friend Billy and this mastermind that I met you at. But more so, just this incredible conversation. So.
Well, I hope that the listeners and the viewers will get something out of it that
it doesn't matter.
Makes a little difference.
Listen, just like you wrote the book for your son, I feel like this podcast was just for me, so that was good. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to our continued relationship. Yeah,
likewise, Benny. I appreciate you connecting and being willing to come to Erie, Pennsylvania, where I'm at.
A couple hours up the road. If you got value out of this podcast, you got questions for Joel, like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. We'll see you on the next episode of the Big Fish Cares podcast.